The screams pierced the night. "You have ruined me. 7 daughters. What will people say about me? How will my name stand?" Tay's voice was sharp, almost broken, echoing across the compound. Every whisper of the villagers seemed to converge in her husband's stern eyes. "From today, you will live in the hut behind this house with them," he barked. Lola, trembling and clutching the newborn girl to her chest, did not cry. She simply stared at him, exhausted, but steady. She had endured the laughter, the gasps, the sneers, and now this, banishment. The villagers murmured among themselves, shaking their heads. Few had imagined that a woman could be treated this way for bearing daughters. Yet Lola understood, with a quiet certainty that the world did not dictate the value of her children. Years earlier, in the sun-baked village of Agbala, Lola had been married to Tai, a man known for his sharp mind and respected lineage. He walked with purpose, laughed easily, and carried the authority of his ancestors in his stride. Their wedding had been spoken of for months, not because of wealth, not because of power, but because of the love that shone between them. Tai looked at Lola with an admiration that drew the envy and awe of every villager. At first, their life was the picture of harmony. Each morning they fetched water together, tilled the land side by side, and in the evenings they sat under the mango tree, laughing and sharing dreams of a family full of life. Tai often teased her, and Lola's soft laughter filled the evenings like music. "Our house will overflow with joy," he said once, eyes bright with hope. "I want children to carry my name, sons to inherit, daughters to marry well." Lola smiled, her hand resting on her belly. "As long as they are healthy," she replied. When Lola gave birth to her first child, a girl named Said, Tai had celebrated openly, sending gifts to her family and boasting of her beauty to the village. Yet by the second child, another girl, the smiles were less frequent. Comments whispered behind closed doors, "A boy will come next." Tay's laughter had grown forced, his patience thinned. By the third daughter, little Nia, fear had crept into Lola's heart. Tay no longer embraced the children with the warmth he once had. He spoke in clipped sentences, his pride bruised with every daughter that arrived. The village began to murmur. 7 daughters and still no son, they said, unaware that each word was shaping a storm. The 4th pregnancy brought Amara, and with it, Tay had already made his decision. He introduced another woman, Yemi, into the house. Yemi was vivacious, clever, and knew how to command attention. When she bore Tay's first son, Ezi, the celebration was immediate and overwhelming. Drums, wine, and praise filled the night. Lola had watched quietly, holding her daughters close. By the 7th daughter, Tay's anger was no longer subtle. "You have destroyed me," he spat one night, voice heavy with resentment. 7 daughters. How will my name stand? Lola, still weak from childbirth, simply held her youngest, Dara, and whispered a prayer she had carried through every trial. The next morning Yemi suggested a solution with a calm smile. "The hut behind the house is empty. Let Lola and her girls stay there. It will be better for everyone. Easy deserves room." Tay said nothing, pride ruling his silence. Lola looked at him quietly, understanding immediately. That morning she led her daughters, Sade, Nia, Amara, Dara, and the others, into the old hut, each step measured, dignified. No one helped. Some watched from afar, some whispered. The hut was small, forgotten, its roof sagging, its floor uneven, but it was theirs now. Lola settled her daughters one by one, teaching them to fetch water early, sweep quietly, and carry themselves with dignity. She did not complain, she did not plead. She simply began to raise them with patience and wisdom. Outside, the main house rang with laughter, the spoiling of ease evident in every gesture. Yet Lola's daughters, Sade, Nia, Amara, Dara, Teni, Ife, and Obi, learned quickly. They learned that life would not hand them favors. They learned discipline, respect, and how to observe the world carefully. Lola reminded them nightly, "You must carry yourself with pride, even when the world pretends not to see. Every action matters." Meanwhile, in the main house, Ys and his younger brother grew indulgent, disobedient, and unruly. Tay ignored their misbehavior, attributing it to youth, while Yemi excused every flaw. The contrast between the houses became clear, one raised with patience and discipline, the other with indulgence and pride. Even in silence, the seeds of the future were planted. Lola's daughters blossomed quietly, their talents, intelligence, and resilience slowly drawing attention from the village. Ys and his brother, on the other hand, became reckless, bringing shame and worry to Tay. The first step toward retribution, though unspoken, had begun. The village watched, the tides turning slowly, and the children, guided by Lola's unwavering hand, were poised to change everything. As the years passed, Lola's daughters, Sede, Nia, Amara, Dara, Teni, Ife, and Obi, grew into young women under her careful guidance. Each day was a lesson in resilience, patience, and dignity. Sade, the eldest, learned to read and write, devouring the few books that passed through Agbala. Nia and Amara were skilled with their hands, mastering farming and craft, while Dara, Teni, Ife, and Obi absorbed wisdom in silence, observing and understanding far more than their ages suggested. Life in the hut was hard, but Lola never let hardship break their spirits. She rose before dawn to fetch water, tend to the small garden, and prepare meals from meager provisions. She did not complain, she simply worked, a steady force in a world that had tried to discard her. Her daughters mirrored her strength, waking early to help without complaint, to learn the lessons she offered in quiet words. The world watches, always, and it rewards those who prepare themselves. Meanwhile, in the main house, Tay's pride had blinded him completely. Ezi and his brother Chima were spoiled, their every whim granted. They roamed the village freely, drank palm wine, mocked elders, and ignored responsibilities. Yemi defended them relentlessly, insisting, "Boys will be boys," even as their actions began to attract the attention of elders and neighboring villagers. Trouble did not arrive with fanfare. It crept in slowly. Complaints about Ezi and Chima began to trickle into the ears of Tay. They fought, they stole, they humiliated tradesmen, and when confronted they laughed, certain that privilege would protect them. Tay's own pride kept him silent, unwilling to face the truth. Each incident chipped away at his respect, yet he remained blind to the growing contrast with Lola's daughters. The turning point came when Said, now 14, was approached by a travelling trader who recognized her sharp mind and diligence. He offered to teach her the ways of commerce, impressed by her intelligence and composure. Nia and Amara, too, found opportunities, the former with a healer passing through the village, the latter with a craftsman teaching embroidery and pottery. Each chance Lola's daughters took was noticed, and slowly the whispers in the village began to shift. "The daughters of the hut. They carry themselves well." Back in the main house, Ezi and Chima's arrogance continued unchecked. The villagers' respect, once granted to Tay, waned. Tradesmen refused to deal with his sons after repeated insults. Neighbors avoided the compound when disputes erupted. Even the elders, once deferential, approached cautiously. Tay felt unease gnawing at him, but pride made it impossible to admit that the seeds he had watered with indulgence were now choking his legacy. By the time Dara and Teni reached their teens, they were skilled, disciplined, and observant. Lola had taught them that character, not birth order or gender, dictated destiny. If and Obi followed closely, excelling quietly, understanding that patience and persistence would win in the end. Each daughter carried a piece of Lola's strength, her lessons embedded in every thoughtful gesture, every careful word, every act of discipline. The difference between the houses could not have been starker. While Lola's daughters grew capable, respected, and admired, Easy and Chima spiraled deeper into misconduct. One evening, after another incident in which the brothers insulted a respected elder, the village convened quietly. "If Tay does not restrain them, the land will," a senior elder warned. Tay nodded politely, but did nothing. Pride again prevented him from acknowledging failure. Meanwhile, Lola watched silently from the hut. She heard of the complaints, the fights, the shame brought upon Tay's name. She said nothing aloud. Instead, she guided her daughters to seize every opportunity, to hone every skill, to learn every lesson the village and passing travellers could offer. Every market day, every visitor, every chance meeting became a classroom. By the time the first whispers of respect for Lola's daughters began circulating, the sons were already entangled in trouble too deep to undo. One day, Chima returned from the market, drunk and belligerent, having insulted a merchant. Ise laughed, egging him on, until the elder overseeing the market stepped in, his voice low but commanding. "You will face consequences, or your father will lose all respect in the land." Tay tried to intervene, but the elder's eyes bored into him, silently accusing him of years of neglect. Humiliation hit Tay like a cold wind. Inside the hut, Lola prepared a simple meal. Her daughters worked alongside her, quietly humming, laughing softly, sharing small jokes only they understood. They were happy, disciplined, and growing in confidence. The contrast was not lost on the village, whose whispers had begun to shift entirely. It is the daughters who shine, the sons bring only shame. The slow unravelling had begun, and the stage was set. Lola's daughters were ready, Tay's sons were spiralling, and the villagers, who once mocked the hut, now watched closely, captivated by the rise of a family forged in patience, resilience, and unwavering guidance. By the time Amara turned 16, the difference between Lola's daughters and Tay's sons had become undeniable. Said, now 17, had begun assisting the trader in the neighbouring village, her sharp mind turning small trades into profitable ventures. Nia had become a skilled healer's apprentice, learning remedies and herbal knowledge that earned respect from villagers far and wide. Dara and Tenny managed the hut's small garden and household with precision and care, teaching Ife and Obi the values of discipline, foresight, and humility. The daughters' quiet strength contrasted painfully with the chaos in the main house. Eze and Chima's antics had escalated. Theft, disrespect, and fights were now routine. One afternoon, after an altercation at the market that left a shop owner bruised and humiliated, the villagers finally demanded accountability. Tay tried to intervene, but even he could not contain their rage. The sons' arrogance had pushed the village beyond tolerance, and whispers of disgrace now hung heavily over the main house. Lola observed quietly, as she always did. She did not gloat, but she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing her daughters had grown resilient, capable, and wise. They understood the world around them and were ready to face it with dignity. Every lesson she had taught them, patience, humility, hard work, was paying off. Her daughters' confidence was subtle, yet commanding. They carried themselves with an authority that even the elders respected. One evening, a letter arrived for Sade from the trader, offering her a permanent apprenticeship in the distant town of Ijebu, a rare opportunity for any girl from their village. The news was met with quiet celebration in the hut. Lola spoke softly. "This is the fruit of your patience, your discipline, and your respect for life's lessons. Go with courage and honor what you have learned here." Tears shimmered in Sade's eyes, not of sadness, but of pride and anticipation. Meanwhile, in the main house, Eze and Chima's behavior reached a breaking point. They had stolen livestock, insulted a traveling merchant, and fought publicly with other young men. Yemi, their mother, attempted to shield them, but even her voice could no longer mask the severity of their actions. When the elders summoned Tay for a formal warning, the shame and fear he had long ignored now struck with full force. He realized, too late, that his indulgence had destroyed more than just respect. It had compromised the very legacy he had sought to protect. At the hut, Lola gathered her daughters. "The world sees you," she reminded them. "It notices discipline, patience, and effort. It also notices pride, indulgence, and neglect. You must choose which path to honor every day." The daughters nodded silently, internalizing the lesson. Their lives, shaped by hardship and careful guidance, had already begun to reflect these truths. Tai returned to the main house in despair. His sons had been reprimanded publicly, yet their defiance remained unbroken. Chima laughed openly during the village meeting, while Eze sneered at the elders. Tai felt powerless, a once proud man now humbled. For the first time he remembered the hut behind the barn, where Lola had quietly raised her daughters with wisdom and care. The memory struck him with guilt and clarity. The children he had scorned had become the embodiment of what he had failed to nurture in his own sons. Word of Lola's daughters' accomplishments continued to spread. Dara, Teni, Ife, and Obi began to attract attention for their skill, intelligence, and character. Elders visited the hut seeking advice, traders asked for guidance, and families from other villages requested instruction for their own daughters. The same voices that had once whispered mockery now spoke with respect. "Those daughters, they are remarkable. Their mother raised them well." Ezi and Chima, on the other hand, faced mounting consequences. After yet another theft and confrontation with authorities, the brothers were finally detained, their arrogance unable to withstand the weight of law and consequence. Tai was left alone in the main house, stripped of pride and respect, forced to reckon with decades of indulgence and neglect. His house was no longer the symbol of power it once had been. It was a warning of what happens when arrogance replaces wisdom. In the hut, Lola remained calm, her daughters by her side. She had not sought revenge, but the contrast between the two households spoke volumes. Her daughter's success and respect had grown quietly, steadily, and inevitably, proving that character and discipline outweigh birthright and indulgence. Lola's eyes met Tay's once, when he came seeking guidance and reconciliation. She said nothing, but her calm strength spoke louder than words. The lesson had been lived, not preached. True power comes from care, wisdom, and nurture. The following months saw the daughters achieving milestones that left the village in awe. Sade's apprenticeship in Ijebu became official. She mastered trading, negotiation, and strategy, sending gifts and letters back to the hut that reflected her sharp mind and humility. Dara began teaching younger girls in the village, sharing knowledge of farming and household management. Teni apprenticed with a local healer, crafting remedies that were sought after beyond their village. If and Obi discovered talents in art and storytelling, their creativity earning them admiration and small recognition from traveling merchants and village elders alike. Lola watched quietly, always guiding, never boasting. Her life had been marked by hardship, but she had cultivated resilience and wisdom in her daughters, shaping them into women who would command respect wherever they went. "The world sees your worth," she reminded them one evening, "but never forget humility. Pride builds, but it can also destroy." Each daughter absorbed the lesson, carrying themselves with dignity, grace, and quiet strength that spoke louder than any words. Meanwhile, the main house grew darker with tension. Ezi and Chima's repeated offences escalated to serious crime. Authorities were called multiple times. The village elders convened, warning Tay and Yemi that their sons were jeopardizing not only themselves, but the family's reputation. Yet Tay's previous indulgence had created a void that could not be filled. His sons' disrespect and defiance persisted. Public opinion shifted completely. Neighbors and friends no longer whispered admiration. Instead, they shook their heads at the son's reckless behavior. Pride had blinded Tay, and now the consequences were inevitable. One day the villagers gathered to witness the results of Lola's guidance versus Tai's indulgence. Sade returned from Ijebu, carrying letters and gifts from grateful traders. Dara and Teni presented a small but thriving school for local girls. Ife displayed intricate artwork, and Obi read aloud stories he had collected from travellers, captivating young and old alike. The contrast was striking. The daughters, disciplined and hard-working, brought honour and admiration. The sons, spoiled and defiant, brought shame and worry. Even Tay could no longer ignore the difference. Humility and regret weighed heavily on him as he visited the hut, hoping to speak with Lola. She received him calmly, her posture firm, her gaze steady. "You are late," she said softly. "Decades too late." Tay lowered his head, swallowing the words of apology he had rehearsed countless times. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I failed to nurture what mattered. My sons, His voice faltered under the weight of truth. Lola's eyes did not soften. She did not need to speak further. Her life, her daughters, and the quiet strength that radiated from them said everything. Eze and Chima were eventually taken into custody after committing a grievous crime in a neighbouring village. Their arrogance had no shield against consequence. Tay's pride crumbled completely as he watched the law take his sons, realizing that indulgence, favoritism, and listening to societal pressures had destroyed the legacy he thought he was protecting. His house, once full of laughter and pride, was now filled with silence, shame, and regret. At the hut, Lola's daughters continued to grow in influence and respect. Travellers sought their guidance, villagers requested their counsel, and other families began to model their upbringing after Lola's methods. The daughters' successes were quiet but undeniable. Their lives spoke volumes about patience, discipline, and careful nurture. The world had noticed them, and more importantly, it had learned a lesson. True legacy comes from values and character, not gender or indulgence. Years later, Tay would return to the hut one last time, humbled, seeking advice and reconciliation. Lola listened quietly, then said, "You destroyed yourself by neglecting what mattered. The rest was inevitable." There was no anger, no malice, only truth. Tay bowed his head in recognition, finally understanding that love must be unconditional, guidance intentional, and character cultivated. Lola's daughters continued their lives, unshaken, respected, and admired. They married well, led in trade and healing, and shared wisdom with younger generations. Lola watched them, a quiet smile on her face. She had not sought revenge, only justice through nurture and discipline, and in that she had triumphed. The village remembered her not for the shame she endured, but for the strength she demonstrated and the legacy she built. Gender had not determined their destiny. Character, discipline, and wisdom had. And every time Tay saw the success of her daughters, he remembered what he had rejected, living with the silent consequence of pride, unchecked. Lola's final words to her daughters echoed through generations. "Raise your children with patience, with love, and with discipline. The world may scorn, but it will never overcome what is nurtured with care." Like this story, share it to inspire others. Subscribe, comment, and like for more powerful African stories of wisdom, resilience, and truth.